All right, so today's lesson we're going to be talking about reducing rates. So first thing we need to do is remember what a rate is. A rate is a ratio that relates to units of measure. For example, we might have a rate of miles per hour or a rate of beats per minute, or maybe a rate of dollars per hour. The key with any rate is that word per. So a rate tells us, for example, miles per hour. If we're traveling, let's say 50 miles per hour, that means for every hour we will have traveled 50 miles. And so that is a ratio. So for example, if we traveled 2 hours, we would have gone 100 miles. 3 hours would be 150 miles. So today's lesson looks at reducing rates before multiplying. So let's just start off with an example. So let's say Mr. Loomis was driving at a rate of 40 miles per hour. All right, so there's our rate that we're going to start working with. So when you are dealing with a rate, it is oftentimes beneficial to set it up as a fraction. So when we set up a rate as a fraction, again, the key word is going to be this per. Per always means division. And in a fraction, the fraction bar is our division. So the units, in this case 40 miles, before the per sets up as our numerator. So we'd have 40 miles as the numerator of our fraction. And the units after our per are the denominator. So there is no number attached to this hour right here, so we assume that it is just per 1 hour. So setting up 40 miles per hour as a fraction is 40 miles over per 1 hour. Now with that, we can do several different things that make our lives a lot easier. So let's start off with an example. Let's say we want to know how far Mr. Loomis will travel in 3 hours. So in the past, with fractions and with units, we've talked about cross-canceling. So I want to know how far I will have gone in 3 hours. So I want to be left with just units of distance. So in order to do that, we need to make these hours cancel out. Remember, for something to cancel out, it has to be in opposite numerator and denominator. So to set this problem up, I'm going to multiply 40 miles per hour by 3 hours. Now, 3 hours is not a rate. So it does not have units in the numerator as well as the denominator. It is just the number 3 hours. So with any normal number, to make it a fraction, we can put it over 1. So now we're left with the multiplication problem, 40 miles per 1 hour times 3 hours over 1. We want to be left with just miles, and if we've set it up correctly, we can see that hours is going to cancel out, and the only units we're going to be left with is miles. So how far will I have traveled in 3 hours? We want some number of miles. We know we've set it up correctly because our hours cancel out. So for example, let's say we set it up incorrectly. 40 miles per 1 hour. And let's say instead we did 1 over 3 hours. If we set the problem up this way, you see that there's nothing that's going to cancel out here. We'd be left with 40 miles times 1, which gives us 40 miles. 1 hour times 3 hours, which gives us 3 hours squared. Those are nonsense units. So if you happen to set it up incorrectly, your units aren't going to cancel out and you're left with nonsense. So we know that this is incorrect. So let's revisit this one and finish it up. 40 times 3 would give us 120 miles over 1, which is just 120 miles. So at a rate of 40 miles per hour, traveling for 3 hours, I will have traveled 120 miles.